senior officers of the Sri Lankan Army, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I feel honored to address this prestigious gathering at the Defense Seminar. The Sri Lankan Army has an enviable record of achievement and contribution to national peace and stability through professional excellence, incisive analysis, and candid exchange of views and ideas. I thank the Sri Lankan Army for affording me this wonderful opportunity to interact with soldiers who have contributed in bringing peace and stability to their country and the region. Sri Lanka has passed through testing times. The last 3 decades were very trying for this beautiful country. It was a test of its endurance and survival. Sri Lanka has proved its mettle by defeating the forces of evil involved in causing death and destruction in its northern and eastern provinces. The LTTE was the only terrorist outfit in the world with access to air and sea power that posed a serious security risk not only to Sri Lanka but to regional countries as well as the world trade passing through the Indian Ocean. Sri Lanka has emerged victorious not only in liquidating the toxic brew of militancy and terror, but also in its pursuit of post-conflict peace and stability. Ladies and gentlemen, defeating terrorism alone cannot ever suffice. For sustainability of peace in Sri Lanka, the processes of rehabilitation, reintegration, and reconstruction are equally essential. The past 4 years have been a unique exercise in peace building for the nation. No universally recognized recipe existed which Sri Lanka could have used to resolve the post-conflict challenges. The solution had to be indigenous, driven by national leadership, and had to be mindful of the local culture and available resources. President His Excellency Mr. Mahinda Rajapakse, in his address to the Parliament on 19th May 2009, said, "We do not accept a military solution as a final solution," unquote. By that, he meant that with the end of the conflict, the process of winning peace will begin. Ladies and gentlemen, the process of reconciliation and reconstruction undertaken by the government of Sri Lanka is development-oriented. It recognizes the fact that economic prosperity can glue together the North and the East with the rest of the country through economic interdependence. The process of reconciliation is based on seeking truth, extending forgiveness, and carrying out justice. The message being given by the government of Sri Lanka, and rightly so, is that no one has lost the war. Everyone feels liberated from the clutches of conflict. Sri Lanka should be proud of having transformed itself within 4 years into a peaceful, stable, and secure country in the region. The Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission has, through its recommendations, offered a most suited political solution to all the ethnic communities in Sri Lanka. Implementation of recommendations made by the LLRC is proceeding at the desired pace. 2012 witnessed elections to the provincial councils in the eastern provinces, and for the first time in 25 years, provincial elections will be held in the former conflict-stricken northern later this month. The most daunting task of resettling about 300,000 IDPs has been adequately addressed. Within a period of less than 6 months of the end of the conflict, the government was able to address the immediate needs of the IDPs. By September 2012, IDPs were resettled in their original habitats and means of earning were provided to them. Similarly, rehabilitation of about 12,000 LTTE cadres involved with LTTE was another gigantic task successfully achieved through an indigenous rehabilitation process. They are all now part of the mainstream Sri Lankan society. Simultaneously, massive development work in the conflict-stricken areas was launched. Repair and rebuilding of roads and railway network, construction of housing facilities, restoration of water supply and irrigation network, demining, building of hospitals and schools, and other administrative infrastructure in war-torn area is underway. Rule of law has been established and macroeconomic stability is being achieved. The growth rate in Sri Lanka had plummeted to 3.5% in 2009. Within 2 years after the end of the war, it reached 8.2% in 2011 and then stabilized to 6.4% in 2012, and it is expected to reach 7% this year. Ladies and gentlemen, with all this progress, no room is left for downplaying Sri Lanka's post-conflict achievements. There is no space for anyone to be disrespectful to Sri Lanka, which has just emerged from a conflict spreading over decades. It is time to acknowledge its achievements and not to find faults with its conduct. While Sri Lanka was engaged in addressing the grave challenge of reconstruction, unfortunately, some tried to narrow down the scope of their engagements with Sri Lanka to human rights issue alone. The international community should in fact constructively engage with Sri Lanka and extend unconditional support to facilitate it in achieving its targets. It is extremely important to understand the intensity of problems which the country had been facing. Making any recommendations which are intrusive, arbitrary, and of political nature can only cause dissension and discord, and such an attitude can act as a catalyst for renewed violence. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan works in close coordination with Sri Lanka at international fora. Unfortunately, the positive achievements of the Sri Lankan government are not fully recognized by some at international fora. Pakistan and Sri Lanka know better than any other country what it takes to deal with the toxic brew of extremism, separatism, and militarism. Pakistan fully endorsed Foreign Minister His Excellency Perry's comments that resolutions are adopted without keeping in mind the realities on the ground, which actually serve as catalyst for polarization and, more importantly, a catalyst for violence. Pakistan's permanent representative to the UN mission in Geneva had stated in March 2013 that if a country-specific resolution is not drafted in consultation with the country concerned, the resolution will not be constructive. On many occasions, Pakistan has stressed that the international community should appreciate the achievements of Sri Lanka in bringing about peace in the country. Sri Lanka should in fact be encouraged to deal with the remaining vestiges of the LTTE that may still be existing. This will ensure a sustained, peaceful domestic situation, guaranteeing continued economic growth and adding to peace and stability in the region. That is not to say that the role of regional powers in Sri Lanka's post-conflict reconstruction phase has not been helpful and obliging. Within this region, China is fast becoming the powerhouse of world economy. It has emerged as a major partner of countries in South Asia. With Pakistan, it has a long-lasting relationship based on firm foundations. China has been a consistent friend of Sri Lanka as well. It has been actively engaged in peace-building activities in Sri Lanka. His Excellency President Mahinda Rajapakse has expressed his support for China to deepen its relations with SAARC countries. Sri Lanka is fortunate enough to have China by its side as a reliable partner. Several projects underway in Sri Lanka with Chinese cooperation will surely contribute towards regional stability. Ladies and gentlemen, as already mentioned, the power on the sea acquired by the LTTE was a constant threat to maritime security in the Indian Ocean. LTT used money received through drug trafficking to buy weaponry for intimidating ocean traffic in the international waterways. With the threat of LTTE looming large in the Indian Ocean, the sea lanes for international trade had thus remained under constant threat. Half of the world's containerized freight and two-thirds of oil shipment travels through the Indian Ocean. Now that the threat of the LTT has been eliminated, the littoral states have gained the opportunity to exclusively focus on their issues like drugs, arms, human trafficking, piracy, and terrorism. Not only that, South Asian states can now focus freely exploiting natural resources within their exclusive economic zones. It is a pleasing development that Sri Lanka has called for international companies and governments to bid for 13 blocks off the northwestern coastline for oil exploration this year. It is important to mention here that no single nation has the resources to address the challenges in the Indian Ocean single-handed. Interests of South Asian countries in the maritime domain are interlinked and interdependent. They must therefore understand the collective responsibility to deal with these challenges. Pakistan believes that instead of generating competition for supremacy by regional littoral states, cooperation is essential to achieve lasting stability in the Indian Ocean region. In this regard, the Galle Dialogue, held in December 2012 on maritime security, was a thoughtful initiative taken by Sri Lanka. This dialogue focused on cooperation and partnership and resolved that the 21st century should have a maritime focus. In today's globalized world, there is a greater need for resolving non-traditional security issues as they have the potential of becoming traditional security challenges of the future. South Asia is home to more than 3 billion people who need food, water, and health care. Non-traditional security threats by nature are transnational. The food crisis of 2008 and 2010 and 11 is a classic example of how just one little recognized non-traditional security issue can have a global impact. Similarly, environmental impacts of climate change, equitable distribution and utilization of water resources are other issues which have implications across boundaries in South Asia. Sources of fresh water are shrinking, thus depleting its availability in the not too distant future. In the context of Sri Lanka, I will briefly mention two important points. Food security is extremely important. The conflict in Sri Lanka had not only displaced farmers, but had also resulted in rising costs of fuel, seeds, and fertilizers. The rural families therefore faced tremendous food insecurity. With the end of the war, displaced farmers have returned to their farmlands and started tilling their land. Sri Lanka is self-sufficient in rice and is now secure in staple food. The conference held on national food and nutrition security at Colombo last year helped in identifying and resolving key issues faced by Sri Lanka in attaining food security. Another important dividend of peace in Sri Lanka is the increase in the number of tourist arrivals in the country. More than 1 million tourists, with the majority from South Asian countries, visited Sri Lanka in 2012. The National Tourism Development Strategy aims at attracting 2.5 million tourists to Sri Lanka by 2016. Tourism promotes people-to-people contacts, and the end of the conflict in Sri Lanka has made all this possible. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan and Sri Lanka share the same dreams, trust, mutual respect, similar values, and enjoy a warm friendship. The land of Pakistan, Taxila, Mardan, Swat, has been a cradle for Buddhist civilization for centuries. Lord Buddha had said, "Don't kill, don't take what is not yours." Islam preaches tolerance, love, and peace. Islam respects other faiths and religions. Pakistan and Sri Lanka, therefore, both uphold life and oppose the forces of death and destruction. Regardless of internal and external challenges, Sri Lanka and Pakistan persistently seek peace within the region and beyond. They are sensitive with regard to their sovereignty against the hegemonic designs of any bigger state. They cooperate and help each other in the fight against terrorism and separatist tendencies. They have rendered assistance to each other whenever needed. Also, they have common perceptions on most global issues and are working together in various international and regional forums for shared values and interests. Only 10 days ago, Foreign Minister, His Excellency Mr. Pires, was in Islamabad, where he met with the leadership of Pakistan and discussed the entire gamut of bilateral relations. Earlier, in June this year, the Chief of Army Staff of Pakistan, General Ashfaq Parvez Kiani, visited Sri Lanka, and he said that he desired regional stability based on balance of power to discourage any form of quest for dominance or hegemony. While reiterating the highest degree of mutual trust and cooperation between Pakistan and Sri Lanka, General Kiani said that the desire of peace is Pakistan's greatest strength, which places Pakistan on a high moral ground and affords it the confidence to exercise restraint even if it was provoked. The armies of the two countries, both Pakistan and Sri Lanka, have proved to be committed partners for the larger cause of preserving peace in our respective countries and the region at large. During 30 years of conflict in Sri Lanka, Pakistan always stood by and wholeheartedly helped the great nation of Sri Lanka, both in moral and material terms. The relationship helped in enhancing Sri Lanka's capacity against terrorists. Bilateral political and military ties are strong. Pakistan sincerely admires Sri Lankan efforts in tackling terrorism. Both the countries understand that there is a strong basis for building a vibrant relationship for their mutual advantage. Their shared concerns about regional security justified an increased synergy of their economies and a strengthening of institutional framework. It is wrong to interpret that they are in league with each other to counterbalance other regional countries. Economic relations between the two countries are flourishing. An FTA between the two countries signed in 2005 allows duty-free trading of 4,000 items between the two countries. Pakistan is Sri Lanka's second largest trading partner in SAARC region. Two-way trade has increased to more than $375 million during 2012. The target to be achieved during the next 3 years is $2 billion. Ladies and gentlemen, South Asian countries fully realize that economic growth in South Asia can be better achieved through greater regional cooperation. Such cooperations create interdependencies, and several points of convergence in bilateral relations emerge among the participating countries. Economic interdependence can also lead to greater cooperation at international fora and international financial institutions, which can supplement regional efforts in achieving economic prosperity. Regional economic cooperation began in the 1990s with the multilateral trade liberalization introduced by Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. Sri Lanka was a pioneer in this regard as it liberalized its trade regime in the 1970s. SAARC is an important platform that acts as a facilitator in speeding up regional economic cooperation. Important drivers of growth that have already been identified by South Asian countries are greater cooperation in the energy sector, food security, water resource management, and trading in goods and services. One of the impediments in regional cooperation is the variance in degree of economic development of member states, which leads to economic inequalities. Member states do not have the capacity to restructure the economies of less developed partners. Competition within South Asia is therefore the common practice. No doubt, SAARC has developed numerous mechanisms to promote regional cooperation, but the spirit to benefit from all such initiatives is lacking. On many occasions, SAARC summits have been postponed due to bilateral problems which have dwarfed the capacity of an otherwise vibrant organization. SAARC summits and trade fairs are to be held annually, but there is no regularity in the schedule. The inclusion of SAARC tourism fair on the sidelines of SAARC trade fair is a good development. Implementation of SAFTA is moving at a snail's pace. Instead, preference is being given by member states to bilateral free trade agreements. Simmering political issues between member states have in fact scuttled SAARC initiatives on fostering economic cooperation. The SAARC Charter does not allow any discussions on contentious political issues among member states, and decisions are taken on the basis of consensus. Removal of mistrust leading to resolution of bilateral political disputes among member states is therefore essential before raising our expectations from SAARC initiatives. The 17th summit in Maldives has resolved to achieve regional economic cooperation leading South Asia to economic union. For that, the roadblocks that impinge on making that progress will have to be removed. The tool for building trust and creating an enabling environment for cooperation exists in the form of SAARC. Ladies and gentlemen, while Sri Lanka has resolved its internal conflict, there are other important issues in South Asia that still remain unaddressed. The threat to regional security has therefore not yet receded completely. Pakistan is currently addressing the challenge posed to its security by extremism and terrorism. This phenomena was an unfortunate consequence of the mobilization of religious fervor by the US and the West to secure Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan. After the Soviet withdrawal, Afghanistan was quickly ignored, and Pakistan was left to deal with the debris of the conflict, that is, weapons, drugs, and religious extremism. The armed forces of Pakistan are spearheading the campaign of the government of Pakistan against militants and have given huge sacrifices in this regard. The determination to root out the evil mix of extremism and militancy will ultimately lead to the annihilation of all such forces in Pakistan. The efforts made so far and the sacrifices given by the people of Pakistan, including the security forces, must be acknowledged by the international community in general and South Asian countries in particular. Ladies and gentlemen, while the end of the conflict in Sri Lanka has reinforced regional stability, peace and security in South Asia will remain elusive as long as the Kashmir dispute between Pakistan and India remain unresolved. This dispute lies at the core of problems between the two countries. It has been the direct or indirect cause of several conflicts between India and Pakistan. Pakistan has repeatedly said that the Kashmir dispute should be resolved in accordance with the wishes of the people of Kashmir. Even though both countries hold diametrically opposed positions on Jammu and Kashmir, a way forward has to be found. Choices have to be made. In the interest of peace and progress in South Asia, there has to be a normalization of relations between India and Pakistan. Recent events are positive indicators of political will on both sides to improve the situation. Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mohammad Nawaz Sharif, has sent messages of goodwill to the Prime Minister of India. He has stated his desire for good neighborly relations, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Government of Pakistan has expressed hope that the two countries will be able to overcome the mistrust that tends to undermine cooperation. Pakistan also wants the resumption of composite dialogue process with India. The Government of Pakistan believes that these processes can help improve bilateral relations between the two countries. The present political ambience in South Asia is one of hope and anticipation. The international community can assist both the countries in maintaining the balance of forces in South Asia, especially through responsible policies in the transfer of advanced weapon systems to the region and by the generation of investment and trade opportunities and extension of economic cooperation to all the South Asian countries. This will be helpful to both Pakistan and India as they need their precious resources to address the development needs of more than 1 billion of their people. Any turbulence in the region threatens to lead all these people into insecurity and turmoil. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to mention here another important factor having an impact on regional stability. Afghanistan is an important member of SAARC. Peace in Afghanistan is therefore vital for the stability of the region. Peace and security in Afghanistan remains a major concern for Pakistan. Pakistan remains committed to working with the international community for the establishment of durable peace and for reconstruction and rehabilitation in Pakistan. President Karzai was in Islamabad just 10 days ago. Pakistan attaches high importance to its bilateral relations with Afghanistan, and both have a multifaceted relationship. There is a considerable bilateral trade that is approaching the $2.5 billion mark. There are substantial people-to-people exchanges. More than 2 million Afghans are still residing in Pakistan. Pakistan is also participating actively in the reconstruction in Afghanistan, where a number of projects are in various stages of completion. It is necessary that all ethnic groups of Afghanistan are consulted and included in the future political system in the country. Pakistan has repeatedly said that the political process in Afghanistan has to be Afghan-led, Afghan-owned, and Afghan-driven. Pakistan believes that all stakeholders in Afghanistan should engage in the reconciliation process. The best route is through a robust political process. Inclusiveness can guarantee success. All stakeholders have to be on board. Pakistan has supported the Doha peace process and has pledged to remain supportive of it as part of the larger reconciliation process in Afghanistan. It has committed its help in the reconciliation process but wants its sincerity to be appreciated and reciprocated. Pakistan is willing to act as a facilitator, but it is for the Afghans themselves to chart their own political future. Pakistan believes that a peaceful, stable, and economically prosperous Afghanistan will guarantee lasting peace and stability not only in Afghanistan but the entire region. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would say that as we pass through these testing times, the challenges before South Asia are daunting and diverse. Pakistan has the capacity and commitment to achieve the common goal of building a prosperous South Asia. Regionally and internationally, Pakistan wishes to be a force for peace and stability. A stable, strategic security environment in South Asia will open new opportunities for economic and social development in the region and enable Pakistan to play its geopolitical role as a bridge of economic cooperation and mutual prosperity between South Asia, Central Asia, and West Asia. Thank you very much.